When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how could Stannis have won the War of the Five Kings. So this has been an ongoing series on the channel. We've done Renly, Balon, and also Robbed up to this point. We'll be doing Joffrey next week, which is going to be an interesting one because he kind of came out on top in the end anyway, even though it was more of Tywin. But we'll just be, in general, having a discussion about Joffrey next week. So, yeah, but before we get into the video, guys, I'd like to subscribe, like, and comment for more of this type of content. Please do. It helps the channel grow, reach our people that might like this content. And let's get into the video. So, Stannis is a very interesting one, because I think out of all of the, I guess, 4 characters, I've tried to very much stay in character on who they were. Balon Greyjoy being the kind of only exception, because Balon, you have to look at culturally who the Ironborn were, and it's very difficult to change how they would have played the war without changing their characters. But Stannis is even more interesting, because Stannis is someone that believes he's the king, and he rightfully probably is the king, unless you want to go with like the Targaryen claimants. So that could be either Daenerys or like Aegon, or I guess Vaegon, if you think he's a Targaryen, or even I guess Jon if you think he's a Targaryen. But in the War of the Five Kings, he is the one that has the most legit claim. Now, with that being said, he has the weakest army. He has the least amount of power, and the only reason Stannis is even able to really compete in the War of the Five Kings is because of Renly's death. Now, the problem with Stannis ending up killing Renly with the Shadow Baby is that, well, the Tyrells don't come to Stannis' cause, which makes sense, and they end up going to the Lannisters, which ends up being Stannis' eventual downfall anyway. So in this scenario of how could he have won the War of the Five Kings, we're going to have to change Stannis' character at least a little bit. And we're going to have to go off of what Cresson advises Stannis in the second book, the beginning of the second book. So we're going to come in and say that Stannis decides, okay, I'm going to have to set aside at least part of my kingdom, or I'm going to have to set aside my differences with Renly for now until the Lannisters have been defeated. So that is, in my opinion, the only route you can go with Stannis and where he comes out on top. Because even if you have him still killing Renly and then taking the rest of the Baratheon forces, there's almost no way to stop the Tyrells from going to the Lannisters. The Tyrells, in and of their own right, have an equal force, if not larger than Stannis' force, even with the Baratheons, rest of their forces from Renly. So I think for the most logical point for Stannis to win the War of the Five Kings, he would have had to either A, make an alliance with Robb, which again, I think out of the two between Renly and Robb, I think that's the one that's even less likely because of Robb being called King of the North, takes an entire part of his kingdom. I think maybe Stannis and Renly could have maybe had a truce at least until the Lannisters were defeated, where Stannis and Renly kind of put aside their differences and said, okay, we're going to settle this thing with the Lannisters for now, and we'll get back to that after, right? And then we'll have our problems. And someone pointed out when I did the Renly video last week is that possibly this is what Renly could have done with Stannis, where he kind of gives up his crown, but then eventually like poisons Stannis later on after the war or something like that. Which could have been possible as well. It's very fitting for Renly's character as well. So he was someone that was not afraid to do something like that. But Stannis in this situation is going to be in an interesting predicament. So he's going to have to ally with, let's say, Renly. Now, let's say Renly still goes ahead and does all this stuff with the Tyrells, and Marjorie becomes his queen. So the question is going to be, with the Renly, the Tyrells, and Stannis all combined, would they have defeated the Lannisters? And this is a resounding yeah. The Lannisters just could not oppose Robb in the Westerlands and in the Riverlands, and then also opposing how strong and mighty of a force you would have had with the Baratheon and Tyrell forces. I mean, think about it. You would have had Randall Tarley and Stannis Baratheon, two of the best. I did a top 10 military commanders, and I think those were my 1 and 2. So you have two of the best commanders in all of Westeros on one side. I don't think they would have lost. Plus, Renly being a great politician, I think that's really a match made in heaven. But I think what's going to end up happening, and again, this is for the best case scenario for Stannis to win, right? So Stannis takes the Iron Throne. Let's say they win like a quote-unquote Battle of the Blackwater, but just in different, circumstances. And Stannis and the Renly camp take the Iron Throne. And then let's say they, do whatever. They take out Tywin. And for now, we'll put the Robb conflict kind of in the background because it's not as important right now. So Stannis and Renly now, they defeated the Lannisters. They have to figure out who is going to become king. Now, Stannis, obviously being the older brother, will say he should be king. Renly, basically going off of, I'm more popular, the people would rather have me, and I have more men than you, Stannis. I should be king. At this point, Stannis could then try and do the Shadow Baby, and maybe that would sway them because the Baratheon forces say they come over to Stannis' side again in a similar fashion. Maybe that could help them. Because the wild card is always going to be the Tyrells. Because the Tyrells, if Renly is killed in this way, I don't think they're going to back Stannis. Unless Stannis has gained their respect throughout the war and, all of that. But the problem even Stannis' own men don't love Stannis. They kind of fear Stannis. So the question is, what do the Tyrells do? Do they go into open rebellion against the crown? What does, the Dornish do in this scenario? What does Littlefinger do? There's so many problems with how Stannis comes out on top because you have to decide. He has to make an alliance somewhere. And would the Tyrells go to the Starks? I don't think so. Because, again, Robb would be married by this point. And two, he'd also, even if he wasn't married to Jane Westerling, he'd also have a betrothal to the Freys. So, and knowing the Starks, Robb, in the first place, didn't really want to break the thing with the Freys, but that's just what ended up happening because of Robb just kind of got caught in a really bad mindset, and he was kind of horny, and I don't know, a lot of things went into the whole Jane Westerling thing, but that's what ends up happening. So I don't think the Tyrells would have wanted that. The Tyrells wanted a king, or they wanted basically Marjorie to become queen, so they wanted to marry a king. So the question is going to become, where could they have possibly done that? Or would they have just bit the bullet and said, okay, we really don't have anybody else we can turn to. The Lannisters have been all but wiped out. Who else do we go to? The Dornish, possibly an option, but the Dornish and Tyrells hate each other, so again, that's not a great option. The Vale has stayed out of the war for the most part, and I think even if the Vale was brought into the war, I don't think there's a possibility that they would go against Robb or something like that. I just don't think it would happen. So I think the Tyrells are in an interesting situation. If the Tyrells had any idea of Gendry being alive, or they had any notice of maybe they tried Edric, but again, Edric is with Stannis at this point. He probably would have been with Renly and Stannis at some point. Maybe Stannis could have gotten Edric from him. I'm not sure on that. So as you can see in this scenario, there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of issues when it comes to what do the Tyrells do the second time. In this basically inevitable situation where Stannis has to kill Renly to basically take the crown and the Baratheon forces. What do the Tyrells do? Now, I think if the Tyrells got their hands on Edric, they would look to marry Edric to Marjorie, saying that maybe Stannis killed Renly and therefore should not sit the throne and trying to take it by right of conquest. I could see something like that happening, but I think it's way more likely that the Tyrells realizing there's not really much else they can do in this situation besides openly rebelling against the Baratheons, or Stannis, I guess specifically. They might just bend the knee. As much as Loras and Marjorie and the Tyrells in general wouldn't like it, they aren't the kind of house that, in my opinion, would want to go by themselves openly against the crown, right? Because again, Robb is not going to help them, more than likely, unless Stannis is really stupid and threatens Robb at the same time. Maybe the Starks and Tyrells make an alliance. Again, I'm not sure. Let me know what you guys think about the Tyrells, because they are the major question mark, right alongside of Littlefinger. What did Littlefinger do in this situation? Littlefinger is someone that would not be welcome with Stannis as the ruler. So would Littlefinger be trying to also undermine Stannis? Would Littlefinger be trying maybe to bring the Vale with the Tyrells? I don't... It's the problem of so many things change in trying to make Stannis win the War of the Five Kings that you start getting into ideas where it's like, where do you think these characters would have gone? And For me, Littlefinger would have been trying to make sure Stannis does not sit the throne very long. Now, Varys would have also been doing that as well. So the question just becomes what happens after Stannis kills Renly. Because in the short term, Stannis could crown himself then. He would have the Baratheon forces. The question just becomes what happens after. So that's where I'm going to leave the video, because I don't think I should speculate even more into that. I kind of gave you guys a couple of roads you could kind of choose from. But let me know down in the comments, what happens after Stannis kills Renly, but just later in this timeline? What actually happens? You know, is there open war between the Tyrells and Baratheon forces at this point? Tyrells bend the knee. Do the Tyrells look to other places, like maybe Robb, maybe Littlefinger tries to get the Vale in there, maybe Robb and Aaron and Marjorie type thing, but I don't know how that would work. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys all in the next video. In the next week as well, we will be talking about Joffrey, things he could have been doing better in the War of the Five Kings to help out the Lannisters, and also in a situation where he would not have been killed at the Purple Wedding, what things he could have done better. But yeah, thank you guys all for watching, and bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.